Today, on this sunny Sunday, we are visiting the colorful town of Colmar. Yes, I know you can't see all the colors, but trust me on this one. You see, I ran out of color film, and the only reel I found was this old one my great-grandfather forgot in the camera bag. So, these images will just have to do. For those of you who are geographically handicapped, I can tell you that Colmar is in southern Alsace, close to the foothills of the Vosges Mountains. If these very obvious clues don't help, I suppose I have to spell it out, since I know that not too many of you are going to run to an atlas to look for the town. Colmar is in the east of France and is the capital of the Haute-Ain department because of its proximity to the Rhine River, to which it is connected by canal. It is situated on the Lauch River, about 64 kilometers, that's roughly around 40 miles, south-southwest of Strasbourg. The town is easily accessible by road, rail and even canal. When you arrive early enough, free parking is also not difficult to find. And let me assure you, finding parking of any kind is not always a simple matter in many French towns. I mentioned sun on a Sunday not because I'm trying to make small talk. Oh no, I'm fully aware that talking about the weather is completely uninspiring, not very original, and simply boring. So the reason why I mention the sun is because of Colmar's claim to be the driest town in France. The sunny microclimate guarantees an absence of too much rain and the presence of abundant sunshine. The average annual rainfall is only around 540 millimeters, which makes it ideal for Alsatian wine. This is one of the reasons why Colmar is the capital of the Alsatian wine industry. That's why a wine fair is also held during August every year. While exploring the old part of town, one is quickly carried back to medieval times. When you study the restored buildings from that era, it is easy to be enchanted by the small details that adorn them, from the colorful half-timbered exteriors to the decorative paintings on the wall panels. You immediately realize that these places date from lost days when builders apparently still had more time to spend on architecture than modern man. It is impressive for the visitor to be reminded that Colmar was founded in the 9th century. Think about that for a moment. The town and some of the buildings are older than the whole history of Western man's arrival in the New World. It makes you understand why Europe is still referred to as the Old World. Apart from medieval buildings, there are also superb examples of buildings in German Gothic and early Renaissance style. The town is also home to a number of old churches, the most impressive one being the Collegiale Saint-Martin, or simply St. Martin's Church, which was built between the 13th and 16th centuries. As I already mentioned, things didn't happen overnight in those days. Maybe that's why the buildings are still standing so many centuries later. In the background you can see St. Martin's Church. When one looks at these buildings, you wish it was possible to time travel. Imagine you could go back to those days and see what it was really like when people lived here. Talking about people, famous people from Colmar include the sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Immediately you want to know what made this man famous. You Americans out there should know. Well, at least the ones that paid attention in history class. Let me give you a few clues. The first clue is New York, and the next, which will immediately give Bartholdi's identity away, is a very famous statue that represents liberty and the American dream to millions of people. Yes, you guessed it, Bartholdi was the man responsible for creating the Statue of Liberty. As one enters town from the north, you drive past the 12-meter high replica of Lady Liberty. This smaller version of the real thing was inaugurated on the 4th of July 2004 when Colmar celebrated the centenary of the death of Bartholdi. In town there is also a museum in the house where he was born, dedicated to a number of his other works. Another famous person that was born and who lived in Colmar is the 15th century artist Martin Schongauer. Schongauer painted the Madonna of the Roses in Colmar's Dominican church. This work is considered by many art critics as his masterpiece. Apart from the Bartholdi Museum, there is also a toy museum and the Unterlinden Museum, where visitors can see the Isenheim altarpiece, created by Matthias Grunewald, as well as many masterpieces of the Rhenish School of Art, dating from the 15th century. As I've already mentioned, Colmar was founded in the 9th century. That's only a bit over 1,000 years ago. In those days, people were not only famous because of what they did, but also due to the way they looked. A certain Charles the Fat visited Colmar in the year 884 for an intensive diet. If the restaurants in those days were as plentiful and as good as the ones today, I'm convinced that his diet must have been a big failure. And now for a bit of historical background. In the year 1226, the town was granted the status of a free imperial city by the Holy Roman Empire. Colmar also witnessed many wars and subsequent invasions. During the 30 Years' War, in the year 1632, the armies of Sweden took control of the city and held it for 2 years. In 1697, Colmar was conquered by France under the leadership of Louis XIV. In 1871, as a result of the Franco-Prussian War, Colmar, as well as the rest of Alsace, was returned to Germany. After the First World War, France took control over it once again. Then, in 1940, it was annexed by German troops. Finally, in 1945, it was reverted back to French control after the Battle of the Colmar Pocket. Similar to so many other European towns, the old part of town is the prettiest area to visit. Apart from the buildings, there are fountains, canals, shops and much more. Not only can you stroll down the cobblestone walkways, but one can also go on a ride in a horse-drawn carriage or on a boat trip in the area that is called Little Venice. Do not expect to see anything like the real Venice though. This area is very picturesque, but it's small and the boats are motorized and not real gondolas. Still, it's definitely worth the visit. For those interested in French cuisine, there are many options, from street cafes to French and Alsatian restaurants. Those who are unwilling to pay the relatively high prices of eating in a restaurant can always buy a few baguettes, cheese and a bottle of wine and picnic in one of the tree-covered parks. Although the town centre seems relatively small, you actually need more than one day if you want to visit all the museums, churches, go on a carriage ride or boat trip and have one of those extended French lunches. A day is just too short to fit everything in. And remember your camera, preferably digital if you have one. It's inevitable not to take countless photos. One last thing, do a few neck exercises. Yes, really loosen it up before you start looking at the roofs of the buildings. This will prevent you from having a stiff neck at the end of the day. If you are ever in this part of France, do yourself a favor and visit Colmar. You will not regret it.